the fuel your body uses. It centers around very strict macronutrient ratios. So carbohydrates are drastically reduced, like down to just 5 to 10% of your daily calories, often under 50 grams a day.
Wow, okay. That's low.
It is. Then protein becomes a moderate player, maybe 10 to 30%, and the real bulk of your energy, a hefty 60 to 80%, comes from fat.
So it's a complete flip from the way most of us typically eat, right? What's the body's reaction to this kind of change?
Well, the primary goal is to nudge your body into a metabolic state called ketosis. When you starve it of its usual glucose supply from carbs, it basically has to find another energy source.
Okay.
And that's where fatty acids come in. Your liver starts breaking them down as these compounds called ketone bodies, beta-hydroxybutyrate, acetoacetate, and acetone. These ketones then become the main fuel, especially for your brain and your body.
Interesting. So it's not just about grabbing any low-carb, high-fat foods you can find. Is there a specific approach to keto in 2025?
You're right, yeah. While technically you could enter ketosis eating, processed junk if it fits those macros, the emphasis in a well-formulated keto diet, especially now in 2025, is really on whole, unprocessed, or maybe minimally processed natural ingredients.
Ah, okay. A cleaner approach.
Exactly. It's about a cleaner way to achieve ketosis.
Yeah.
We should probably also mention the ketogenic proportion. It's basically the ratio of fat to everything else, the protein and carbs. In medical settings, you might hear about a classic 4-to-1 ratio. So 4 parts fat for every 1 part of protein and carbohydrates combined.
Okay, that gives us a solid understanding of what keto is aiming for. Okay, let's zoom out a bit, because keto feels so modern, so trendy, but you mentioned its history.
Oh yeah, it's surprisingly deep. The research confirms this isn't just some new weight loss fad from the internet. It's been used therapeutically in medicine for over 100 years.
100 years? Really?
Yep. Specifically documented back to 1921. Its main use back then, treating epilepsy, especially severe cases in children that weren't responding to the drugs available at the time.
Wow, so it was a medical treatment decades before it became a weight loss thing?
Exactly. Now, low-carb diets in general, they've been around for weight loss since, the 1970s. They've popped up in various forms. But the ketogenic diet, the very low-carb version aimed at inducing ketosis, that really surged into the mainstream more recently.
Why then?
A lot of it seems linked to more research digging into the mechanisms of ketosis itself. Scientists started exploring how those metabolic shifts might specifically impact weight, appetite, blood sugar, that kind of thing.
Which naturally leads us to why most people try it today, weight loss. Is the keto diet actually effective for that? Because that's what a lot of people are really interested in.
Right. And the evidence does point to the keto diet being an effective strategy for weight loss, at least in the short term. There are several proposed reasons why. One prominent idea from researchers Feynman and Fine suggests that by cutting carbs so drastically, you lower your insulin levels. And since insulin plays a role in storing fat, lower levels can then promote lipolysis. That's the breakdown of stored fat.
That makes intuitive sense, yeah. Lowering the stored signal could free up fat to be burned.
Exactly. Another factor is something called gluconeogenesis.
Gluconeogenesis.
Yeah, it sounds complicated, but basically when you drastically cut carbs, your body has to create glucose from non-carbohydrate sources like protein. And this process of making new glucose, it's metabolically expensive. Your body actually burns extra calories just doing it.
Ah, interesting.
And then there's also emerging evidence that ketosis itself might have a direct appetite-suppressing effect. One study, for instance, found that men reported feeling less hungry when they were actually in ketosis.
And what about that rapid weight loss people often experience right at the start? Is that all fat burning away?
Not entirely, no. A significant part of that initial drop is actually water weight.
Right, the water weight.
Yeah. Glycogen, that's the stored form of glucose in your muscles and liver. It binds a considerable amount of water. We're talking almost 3 to 4 grams of water for every single gram of glycogen.
Okay.
So when you deplete those glycogen stores on keto, you lose that associated water. Plus, lower insulin levels can affect how your body retains sodium, which also influences water balance. So that initial loss, which can be quite noticeable, maybe up to 4.5 kilos in the first couple of weeks, it's a mix of water and some fat.
Okay, so beyond that initial whoosh, let's call it, what do the broader studies tell us about sustained fat loss on keto?
Right, looking at the bigger picture, several meta-analyses, where they pool data from multiple studies, give us a clearer view. A study by Mansour and colleagues found that low-carb diets generally led to more weight loss than low-fat diets over 6 months, about 2.17 kilograms more on average.
Okay, that's something.
It is. However, when Bueno and his team looked at studies lasting a year or more, that difference narrowed quite a bit. Ketogenic diets only resulted in slightly greater weight loss, maybe around 0.91 kilograms more compared to low-fat diets.
So the edge might lessen over time.
It suggests that, yeah. While keto might offer an initial advantage, its long-term superiority for weight loss isn't, definitively proven. It might level out. Interestingly, though, a longer study by Saslow, lasting 32 weeks, did find significantly more weight loss in the keto group compared to a standard diabetes diet. So the overall takeaway seems to be that while keto can be an effective tool for fat loss, especially short-term, its long-term success might really hinge on whether people can actually stick to such a restrictive eating pattern. Kind of like any other calorie-controlled diet, really. Adherence is key.
So it can be a kickstart, but long-term success really comes down to consistency, like with most things. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Let's talk about some of the other potential perks people talk about with keto. What are the main advantages beyond just the number on the scale?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the most commonly reported benefits is actually improved appetite regulation. Many people find they feel significantly fuller and have an easier time controlling their hunger on keto compared to, say, standard calorie-restricted diets.
That sounds like a big deal. Hunger is tough.
It really is. And studies have shown that ketogenic diets can actually suppress hunger hormones like ghrelin, even as people are losing weight.
Yeah.
There seems to be a link between higher levels of that ketone body, beta-hydroxybutyrate, and reduced feelings of hunger.
So you're losing weight, but potentially not feeling ravenous all the time.
Exactly. That can be a huge advantage for people who struggle with constant hunger on other diets. It might allow for weight loss without feeling like you're constantly fighting your own body. There was one study with individuals who had type 2 diabetes, and they reported feeling less hungry after just 10 weeks on keto, despite losing weight.
Okay, that's a major plus. What else makes keto stand out?
Well, we touched on the rapid initial weight loss, which psychologically can be a powerful motivator for some people. Seeing quick results can help.
Sure.
Beyond that, keto has shown significant promise in improving blood sugar control. Because the carbohydrate intake is so low, it leads to much smaller swings in blood glucose and insulin levels.
Right, less sugar coming in.
Precisely. Research indicates that it can effectively lower overall blood sugar levels, and sometimes that happens even independently of weight loss. In fact, it generally appears to be more effective than traditional low-fat diets in managing various metabolic markers related to blood sugar, especially for people with type 2 diabetes. Meta-analyses have confirmed that keto diets tend to be better at reducing HbA1c, that's a long-term measure of blood sugar control, at least in the short to medium term, compared to standard diabetes diets.
So it could be a really valuable tool for managing blood sugar issues then.
It certainly looks that way. Furthermore, keto can help improve insulin sensitivity. That's often impaired in individuals who are overweight or have type 2 diabetes. It does this by lowering fasting insulin levels and reducing those daily fluctuations. And interestingly, the ketone bodies themselves might have direct positive effects on how insulin works. Some studies have shown improvements in insulin markers within just a few days of starting a keto diet. And we also tend to see higher rates of people with type 2 diabetes being able to reduce or even stop their diabetes medications when following keto compared to those on standard calorie-restricted approaches.
Wow, those are some pretty compelling metabolic benefits. Are there any other advantages we should be aware of?
Yes. There's also some evidence suggesting that the keto diet might help reduce inflammation. Inflammation is often elevated in people who are overweight or obese. This could be partly due to the effects of the ketone bodies themselves, and also just from cutting out pro-inflammatory sugars and refined carbohydrates.
Makes sense.
And finally, it's maybe worth considering that the way keto works, increasing satiety, reducing appetite, improving blood sugar control, it kind of mirrors the mechanisms of some obesity medications. So potentially it could reduce the need for those meds in some individuals.
Okay, so a potentially powerful set of advantages there. But of course, now we have to address the concerns. What are the main disadvantages and risks people should know about with keto?
Right. The flip side, cardiovascular risk is a big one. And honestly, it's still a topic of ongoing debate. While keto can sometimes improve certain heart health markers in the short term, like triglycerides and maybe blood pressure, the diet's inherent restrictions mean it often doesn't fully align with what we generally consider a heart-healthy eating pattern long-term. While a limited intake of whole grains, fruits, and many vegetables can lead to lower levels of fiber, essential vitamins, and antioxidants, things we know are generally good for heart health. Plus, there's often a tendency for people to consume more saturated fatty acids and maybe processed animal products on keto, depending on how they do it. Some broader analyses looking at low-carb diets, not necessarily strictly ketogenic ones, but low carbs suggest they might actually be more beneficial for long-term cardiovascular health than very low-carb approaches like keto. In individuals who are at a healthy weight to start, keto has sometimes been shown to increase total cholesterol, LDL, that's the bad cholesterol, and even HDL, good cholesterol.
So it can raise LDL. That sounds concerning.
It can, but the effect on LDL in people who are overweight or obese is more variable across different studies. It might depend quite a bit on the type of fat being eaten, especially saturated fat intake. Some studies show LDL increases, others show no significant change, and some even show decreases. So it's not totally clear-cut.
Okay.
And it's also important to note that those initial positive effects you might see on triglycerides, they might not be sustained over longer periods of observation.
So it's definitely not a straightforward path to better heart health for everyone then.
That seems to be the case, yes. Another significant concern is the potential for nutritional deficiencies. By severely restricting such a wide range of carbohydrate-rich foods, people can easily miss out on important fiber, vitamins, antioxidants. One study even found that a standard keto diet provided lower amounts of several key minerals, magnesium, calcium, iron, potassium, than the recommended daily allowances. Although, interestingly, blood levels of these minerals were often still within the normal range in that study.
And then there's the infamous keto flu. Can you explain what that actually entails?
Ah, yes. The keto flu. As your body adapts to using ketones instead of glucose for energy, you might experience a range of pretty unpleasant side effects. These can include things like intense cravings, fatigue, low mood, irritability, maybe constipation, headaches, and that sort of foggy thinking or difficulty concentrating. People often call it brain fog.
Doesn't sound fun. How long does that last?
It can vary, but typically anywhere from a few days to several weeks as your body adjusts. It's a transition period.
Sounds like a pretty uncomfortable transition for some people. What about just sticking with it long term? Is it something people can realistically maintain?
That's a major point. Long-term sustainability and adherence are definitely significant hurdles for many people on the keto diet. It's a very restrictive way of eating, let's be honest. And the limited variety of foods, plus excluding many commonly enjoyed foods, can make it really challenging to stick with over the long haul. Satisfaction can be an issue.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And there are also some potential long-term risks that have been suggested in research, though more study is needed. Things like a possible increased risk of kidney stones, maybe osteoporosis in some studies. Additionally, keto can sometimes lead to increased blood levels of uric acid, which is a known risk factor for gout. And then there's the potential for interactions with certain medications, particularly things like SGLT2 inhibitors used for diabetes or heart failure. That combination could increase the risk of a dangerous condition called ketoacidosis. And generally, caution is strongly advised for individuals with type 1 diabetes because of that inherent risk of ketoacidosis.
Okay, that's a comprehensive look at the potential downsides. Now, let's just briefly touch on that intriguing area of mental clarity. There's a lot of anecdotal buzz, right, about keto improving focus and cognitive function. Is there any actual science backing that up yet?
There are certainly those anecdotal reports, yes, and some initial research is starting to explore potential psychological benefits. It's still early days, though. For example, there was a small randomized controlled trial with military personnel over 2 weeks. It found that those on a ketogenic diet reported improved mood, better cognitive performance, and felt less sleepy during periods of extended wakefulness compared to those on a standard high-carbohydrate diet.
That's interesting. What might be the underlying reasons for these potential mental benefits?
Well, one possibility is maybe the more stable energy supply that ketones could provide to the brain, compared to glucose, which can lead to more peaks and troughs in energy. Also, remember that feeling of increased satiety on keto. Unlike the hunger that often comes with calorie restriction, feeling full might positively impact psychological well-being just by reducing those negative emotions tied to being hungry all the time.
That makes sense.
And there's also this growing field called metabolic psychiatry. It's investigating the potential for ketogenic diets to impact brain health beyond just weight loss. They're looking at mechanisms like potentially reducing neuroinflammation or improving the brain's energy metabolism. There was an uncontrolled study, so we need to be cautious, but it showed some promising improvements in symptoms of depression and psychosis in patients with severe mental illnesses who followed a ketogenic diet.
Wow.
And there's also some very preliminary data suggesting potential benefits for generalized anxiety as well.
So while it's definitely still early days, it sounds like there's some intriguing evidence that keto might have effects beyond just the physical body.
Exactly. It's an area that definitely warrants more rigorous research for sure.
All right, well, we've covered a huge amount of information here. To sort of wrap things up, what's the key takeaway message about the keto diet as we see it in 2025?
I think in 2025, the keto diet really stands out as a complex dietary approach. It has significant potential, especially for short-term fat loss and definitely for improvements in blood sugar control. And as we just discussed, there's also that emerging evidence hinting at possible benefits for mental clarity. However, it's equally important, crucial really, to acknowledge the notable disadvantages and the risks associated with it.
And what about the long-term picture, the effectiveness and the overall health implications down the road?
Yeah, that's key. While that initial weight loss can be really appealing, it's important for you listening to remember that long-term success in weight management is likely comparable to other well-balanced diets, and it's heavily dependent on being able to actually stick with the plan. We also really need to be mindful of those variable effects on cardiovascular health markers, particularly LDL cholesterol, and the real possibility of nutritional deficiencies if the diet isn't very carefully planned and executed.
So it's definitely not a magic bullet or a one-size-fits-all solution.
Precisely. And this brings us to a really important final thought for you. Given these very individualized responses people have to this diet and the range of potential short-term benefits versus those long-term considerations, how can you best figure out if the keto diet is actually a suitable and, just as importantly, a sustainable choice for your unique health goals and needs, especially in the context of everything we're learning about nutrition?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It really is. And as always, maybe, especially with such a significant dietary shift like keto, talking with your doctor or registered dietitian, getting that personalized advice is absolutely essential before making any drastic changes to how you eat.